The way Malik's eyes narrowed told me he wasn't expecting that answer. He'd come here, like always, betting on the old version of me, the woman who flinched, who rationalized, who bent herself small so the storm could pass over her. But storms don't pass when you're the lightning. He stubbed his cigarette into Grandma's ashtray with a deliberate finality that made my blood heat. She would have wept to see her table scarred like that. Maybe that was why my hands stopped trembling. The anger sharpened into something cleaner. Resolve. "Loretta's already filed," he said, his voice low, as though lowering it could make it sound like truth instead of manipulation. "You don't know what kind of mess you're in. This is bigger than you, Kemi. If you fight this, you'll drag your name through mud in front of people who won't forget." I took a slow step forward until the space between us felt electric. "My name was already dragged through mud," I said. "The night you kissed my cousin under my roof. The day the whole family chose her over me. You think court scares me? Court is order. I know how to win in order. It's chaos I had to survive." He tilted his head, studying me like a puzzle with a missing piece. But I didn't give him time to answer. "Get out," I said, my voice steady. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then, reluctantly, he stood. But before he left, he paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed in the thin streetlight leaking through the curtain. "You'll regret this," he murmured. "No," I said, "you will." He left, and the house inhaled again, as though relieved to be rid of him. If you're listening right now, let me remind you, betrayal doesn't always break you. Sometimes it builds the backbone you didn't know you had. And when that moment comes, when your betrayers try to crawl back into the spaces they once owned, don't forget, you get to decide whether they cross that threshold again. The days that followed moved like storm clouds across a stubborn sky. Loretta's petition to contest the deed gained traction. Malik shadowed her, whispering poison into anyone's ear that would listen. Cousins who hadn't called me in years suddenly found their voices in affidavits. Tasha posted pictures online of her new family life, with Malik smiling at her side. But here's what they didn't anticipate. I wasn't playing alone. I sat down with my lawyer and we built a strategy, not of defense, but offense. We gathered Grandma's church friends who witnessed her final signing, their testimonies ironclad and unwavering. We compiled financial records showing years of upkeep and tax payments I had quietly shouldered, while the rest of the family ignored the property. And then I gave the journalist every piece of documentation that painted the true picture. How they called me poor while I invested, how they laughed while I worked, how they schemed while I built. The story ran with the headline, "The heiress they called poor." It spread like a spark in dry grass. Phones rang, neighbors whispered. Suddenly, it wasn't just my fight, it was a parable. And nothing terrifies a family like ours more than exposure. When the next meeting was called, not in a church basement this time, but in a lawyer's office downtown, the energy had shifted. The cousins sat quieter. Loretta's voice cracked more often than it commanded. Malik avoided my gaze, his bravado dimmed now that the walls had ears beyond bloodlines. I placed Grandma's envelope on the table. "She chose me," I said simply, "and I will honor her choice." Loretta leaned back, weary, like the air had been drained from her lungs. "You've turned the family against itself." "No," I said, "you did that when you called me poor." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was surrender dressed in shame. But as I left the office, Malik caught up to me on the sidewalk. His voice was sharp but softer than before. "You may have won the house," he said, "but you haven't seen the end of me." I stopped, turned, and looked him dead in the eye. "I don't need to," I said, "because the end of you was the day I stopped believing you had any power left." And for the first time since everything began, I saw it, fear flickering behind his smirk. The kind of fear that only appears when the person you thought was broken takes flight instead. The courthouse steps were still warm from the sun as I descended them, papers tucked against my chest like armor. The ruling wasn't the end, not yet. The case would linger, motions filed, deadlines stretched, but it was the beginning of the end. The judge upheld the deed, affirmed my standing, and froze any attempt to sell the house until further review. In legal language, it was just a preliminary victory. But in blood, it was a declaration. I wasn't to be erased. Malik waited at the curb, leaning on the black sedan Loretta had rented for the day. His suit was pressed, but his eyes were hollowed, his shoulders sloped. He looked smaller, somehow, like the stage lights had gone out and left only the man behind the performance. "Congratulations," he said when I approached. "Enjoy your hollow prize." I paused, met his gaze. "It's not hollow, it's rooted. That's why you wanted it." He chuckled, but it broke in the middle. "You think you've beaten us, but money doesn't hold families together. Secrets do, and this family still has plenty." I tilted my head. "Secrets only have power if you keep them." His jaw twitched. For the first time, I realized Malik was afraid not of losing the house, but of losing control. He'd lived his whole life by managing narratives, whispering one version to Loretta, another to Tasha, a third to me. But my story was now written in ink and headlines, and no matter what he whispered, the world had already heard me roar. Still, his warning gnawed at me. Families like ours didn't survive generations without burying entire skeletons beneath mango roots. What if there were truths even I hadn't unearthed yet? That night, back in Grandma's house, I walked the floors restlessly. The scent of mango leaves drifted in, mixing with the lingering perfume of furniture polish and old books. Something pulled me toward the attic, a place I'd avoided for years. The ladder creaked under my weight as though complaining at the intrusion. Dust choked the air, and cardboard boxes leaned like drunken sentries. I shifted through them, holiday decorations, faded letters, a stack of hymnals, and then found a locked tin box, small but heavy. Grandma's initials were carved faintly into the lid. I carried it down to her desk, rummaged through drawers until I found a thin brass key. The lock clicked open. Inside, deeds older than I'd ever seen, receipts, photographs of faces I didn't recognize, and letters written in a hand that wasn't hers. One caught my breath. It was addressed to Loretta, dated 20 years back, signed by Malik's father. The words swam before me, promises of money exchanged, threats of silence, and a line that shook my marrow. "Make sure she never learns the truth about her inheritance." My inheritance. The air in the room thickened, heavy with the weight of decades. The house wasn't just a house. It was the tip of an iceberg they had spent their lives keeping submerged. Malik's warning wasn't bluster. It was prophecy. I sat back, envelope in hand, and realized winning the deed was just the first battle. The war was deeper, older, tangled in roots that went beyond betrayal, beyond family meetings, beyond Malik's smirk or Loretta's clipboard. The war was about truth. And the truth was bigger than me, bigger than the house, bigger than any helicopter landing in defiance. It was the kind of truth that, once spoken aloud, would not just end fights. It would end bloodlines. If you're still listening, lean closer. Because what I discovered in that box is the reason Malik's eyes carried fear. The kind of fear that only comes when a man knows the ghosts he tried to bury are finally clawing their way to the surface. And I was ready to let them speak. The letter trembled in my hand, but not from weakness, more like the vibration of something breaking open inside me. Malik's father had written in blunt, cruel honesty, the kind of handwriting that wasn't meant to be read by anyone outside the conspiracy. Make sure she never learns the truth about her inheritance. Those words throbbed in my head like a drumbeat. The inheritance wasn't just the house. It was something bigger, something they had spent decades protecting from me. I pulled more papers from the tin box, unfolding them carefully. Old land deeds, mineral rights, a map so faded I had to hold it up against the lamp to trace the outlines. Acres upon acres beyond the family house, land parcels in Ogun State, Nigeria, in my grandmother's maiden name. Hundreds of acres. My pulse raced. It hit me like thunder. My grandmother had never been poor. She had been strategic, leaving pieces scattered in different names, hidden in documents that only trust could unlock. The house wasn't the prize. It was the key. And Loretta had known. Malik's father had known. Maybe Malik knew too. That's why they fought so hard, why they painted me as poor, laughed at me, dismissed me, because they couldn't let me see the full scope of what I carried in my blood. The floor creaked above me. My head snapped up. Someone was in the house. I gathered the papers, shoved them back into the tin, and closed the lid. My phone lay on the desk, too far to reach without noise. I listened, breath shallow, as footsteps crept along the upstairs hallway. "Loretta," I called, voice sharp to mask the tremor. No answer, just silence thick enough to strangle. I stood, gripping the tin box like a weapon, and moved toward the stairs. The steps came again, measured, deliberate. Then a shadow fell across the landing. Malik. But his face wasn't mocking this time. It was grim, almost resigned. "You weren't supposed to find Tha." They called me poor before they asked me to speak. That was the tone of the room. Paper plates on a folding table, finger food sweating under plastic wrap, and a circle of relatives who had already decided who I was before I opened my mouth. Aunt Loretta tapped the clipboard like a gavel and said, "Be realistic about Kemi's contribution." Realistic meant small, disposable, the kind of word families use when they want to fold you into a corner and staple you there. My cousin Tasha sat 2 chairs down, a diamond on her finger catching the fluorescent light like a siren, and my ex-husband, yes, ex, leaned behind her chair as if the room had always belonged to them. Someone muttered, not quietly enough, "She can't keep up, she's poor." The word slid across the tablecloth like grease. No one flinched. I counted 19 eyes that didn't blink. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know what I'd planned. The meeting had a purpose, they said, to restructure expectations for Grandma's house, the one on Lark Street with the mango tree leaning over the fence like a blessing. They wanted to sell it, divide the proceeds, fund Aunt Loretta's new retirement plan, and this part came out in a cough, help with Tasha and Malik's wedding expenses. Malik, my ex-husband. The room didn't say the word infidelity, the room said new chapter. Fresh start. No hard feelings. I could still smell the perfume from the night I found them. Sweet, expensive, the kind that clings to a shirt collar like a bruise. It had been my birthday. She'd borrowed my lipstick in the bathroom and told me I was glowing. That was the glow of a woman being replaced. I let them talk. I let the numbers march across photocopied spreadsheets. I let Aunt Loretta use her management voice, the one that made people sign their dignity away with a ballpoint pen. When she said, "Kemi, we'll need your signature today so we can proceed," I nodded as if my hands were empty. The room relaxed. People only ever relax when they think you're smaller than the moment. "Before I sign," I said, "can we talk about poor?" A smattering of fake confusion, a few pursed lips. "No one meant anything by it," Uncle Ray said, already meaning everything by it. "We just need to be practical." Practical, like inviting my ex-husband to a family meeting about the sale of my grandmother's house months after he held my cousin in the dark of our kitchen. Like calling Betrayal a budget line. Practical, like handing me a pen and pretending the past didn't pulse under the table. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that takes practice, gentle enough to pass, sharp enough to cut if you lean too close. "Of course," I said, "practical is good." If you're listening right now, and your chest got tight where the word poor landed, take a breath with me. This is where the story turns. If you love revenge that arrives in silence and receipts that speak louder than apologies, make sure you're subscribed, because the next 3 minutes are why people go quiet at reunions. Here is what they didn't know. Months ago, while I was busy being called unambitious, I learned the language of altitudes. I learned to read contracts the way other people read tea leaves. I took what Malik left me with, the ache, the echo, the empty, and fed it to work that grew teeth. I kept my head down, said little, signed bigger. When a client insisted on meeting at a private heliport because time is money, I learned both could be mine. When a mentor said, "Own what they think you rent," I listened. I learned the taste of steel and rotor wash and power that doesn't need to be loud to be undeniable. Aunt Loretta slid the signature page toward me. "We'll fill in your portion after you're done." Her nails were a perfect pale pink, neat and decisive. "This is for the best." "For who?" I asked softly. "For everyone." "Not everyone is in the room yet," I said. It started as a tremor, a hum that the air pretends to ignore. The building's thin windows vibrated. Plastic cups shivered and knocked. Someone frowned and turned toward the door. The sound grew, lifted, took the ceiling with it. Tasha stood, her diamond catching light like panic. Malik's mouth tightened. Uncle Ray said, "What's that?" Despite knowing exactly what that was. It's funny how judgment is always sure of itself until the sky answers. I checked my phone. One message, on approach, 2 minutes. I tucked it away and reached for the pen. The rotor thrum swelled, a heartbeat outside the roof. Chairs scraped. Children squealed. Aunt Loretta said, "What is going on?" in the voice she used for late rent and missed shifts. I signed, not the line they wanted, not the number they had given me in advance, but a different document entirely that I had folded into the stack an hour before, the way a magician palms a card while the audience watches his empty hand. The doors flew open on a gust that tasted like metal and tomorrow. Paper plates took flight like white birds. Napkins became weather. People rose and stumbled toward the lawn, hands shielding their faces as the helicopter settled on the grass behind the church hall, the pilots' helmets gleaming under the sun. A logo curved along the fuselage, simple, clean, unfamiliar to everyone but me. A name I'd kept off my lips and on my contracts. Aunt Loretta's clipboard clattered to the floor. "Who's who?" she started, her voice shredded by wind. I stood, smoothed my dress, tucked the pen into my bag like a secret finally satisfied. Then I walked through the river of air and paper and judgment, past my ex-husband's hand reaching for a name he no longer owned, past the cousin who borrowed my lipstick and my life and thought they were the same, and I stepped onto the lawn where the blades slowed their anger and changed it into awe. "Your ride, ma'am," the crew chief said, not loudly, not cruelly, but with the gentle respect the world learns when it's forced to look again. And the family that called me poor learned a new word for me: landing. The wind settled into whispers and the lawn looked like it had been baptized, paper plates clinging to the fence, confetti that used to be agendas. My family formed a half circle a safe distance from the blades, eyes darting between the helicopter and me like I'd stepped out of a movie they hadn't paid to see. The crew chief lifted a palm to me, time to board, but I didn't move. I wasn't here to escape. I was here to change the weather. Malik was the first to speak, because pride always thinks it owns the microphone. "You rented that," he said, voice loud enough for the cousins filming on their phones. "It's a stunt." "It's a receipt," I answered. Tasha's diamond trembled where her finger clenched. "For what?" "For not asking permission anymore." Aunt Loretta found her clipboard on the grass as if paper could save her again. "Helicopters don't sign deeds," she said, which would have been clever if she hadn't been shaking. "We have a schedule. We voted. We proceed." I took 2 steps closer, let them smell the jet fuel on my dress and tomorrow in my posture. "You voted to sell something that didn't belong to you," I said. "Not anymore." Uncle Ray scoffed. "And what, you think that toy makes you the owner?" "No," I said, pulling the folded document from my bag. "This does." The page looked unremarkable, ink and signatures sitting politely on cream paper. But some pages are tectonic plates. I unfolded it, handed it to Aunt Loretta, and watched her face move through the stations of grief. Denial, bargaining, and the small, twitching muscles of a woman arriving at acceptance she doesn't want. "It's a recorded lien," she said, her voice thinning. "On Grandma's house." "Correct," I said. "The bank sold the non-performing note 2 months ago. I purchased it." Even Malik blinked. "You bought the debt." "I bought the leverage," I said softly. Different word, same outcome. There's a particular silence that arrives when a room realizes its math never included you. It makes the air heavy, makes people rewrite their last 10 sentences in their heads. Tasha tried a smile that only covered half her teeth. "That doesn't mean you own it." "It means no sale closes without me," I answered. "It means no signatures move unless I say so. It means poor has a different definition today." If you're listening and your pulse just jumped, good. Save this moment, the sound your life makes when the power returns to your body. If you like watching a plan unfold one quiet page at a time, make sure you're subscribed. What comes next had my ex-husband rereading his vows like fine print. "Where did you get the money?" Malik asked, a question that shouldn't matter but always does. I looked at him, at the jawline I used to trust, at the eyes that had studied me enough to betray me efficiently. From working, I said. From being underestimated. From a mentor who taught me the difference between assets and applause. I could have told them about the nights I learned valuation instead of sleeping, about the client who paid in equity because I solved a problem no one else would touch. I could have told them about the private dinners where men talked in riddles and I learned to answer in numbers. I didn't. Some stories only belong to the woman who survived them. Aunt Loretta's managerial muscle flexed, even bruised. "We can still proceed," she said. "We'll pay off the lien from the sale and—" "The lien isn't the only paper," I said, and watched her wobble. "Grandma filed a transfer on death deed last spring. It was witnessed at church and notarized by Deacon Ellis. It names a beneficiary." She searched my face for mercy and found only truth. "Who?" "Me." A murmur rippled through the cousins like wind through tall grass. Someone cursed under their breath. Uncle Ray made a sound like a chair dragging across a floor. Tasha took a step toward me, then thought better of it. Malik tilted his head, study. "While you're still learning checkers. We've had arrangements with your family for a long time. Understandings. Some written, most not. The land you've uncovered is not as free as you might believe." I tilted my head. Arrangements made without my consent are worthless. Mr. Hart's smile vanished. He opened the folder, revealing documents stamped and signed, leases, contracts, agreements spanning decades. Some bore Loretta's signature, others Malik's father's. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. "These agreements," he continued, "entitle my clients to significant holdings. Your sudden publicity has complicated matters, but we are willing to offer you a settlement to step aside. Generous, immediate, clean." His words dangled in the air like bait. I stepped closer, voice steady. "Do you know what they used to call me at family meetings? Poor. They mocked me in front of everyone. But tell me, why would you offer a fortune to someone you think is poor unless you know she's sitting on something priceless?" For the first time, his composure cracked. Only slightly, but enough. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said. "Walk away now and you'll live a comfortable life. Stay and you'll make enemies who don't forgive." I thought of Grandma's letter. Fear only the weakness within. I inhaled, slow and sure, until even the shaking in my hands subsided. "You're right," I said softly. "I don't forgive either." I snapped the folder shut and pushed it back into his chest. His jaw clenched, but he didn't move. "You have until the end of the week to reconsider," he said finally. "After that, things will move beyond negotiation." He turned, walked back toward the SUVs. Engines roared to life, tires crushed gravel, and the convoy disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving only the silence of the mango tree behind. I exhaled, long and heavy, and sank onto the porch steps. The papers upstairs weren't just inheritance now. They were evidence in a war larger than blood, larger than betrayal. If you're still with me, remember this. When power comes hunting, it dresses itself in politeness first. Contracts, offers, smiles, but beneath all that, hunger, and hunger never stops at one bite. That evening, I called the journalist again. This time my voice carried no hesitation. "Release everything," I told her. "Every deed, every hidden deal, every secret I found, put it all in print. Because if they wanted war, I would not fight it in shadows." The truth was going to burn, and this time, everyone would see the flames. "You said." The article hit within 48 hours. Front page, bold headline. Photographs of the land deeds, the old signatures, even a blurred image of Malik's father with a caption that screamed, "Generational betrayal, hidden land empire exposed." Phones buzzed across the city. Social media feeds lit up. My name was suddenly everywhere, whispered in shock, shouted in envy, dissected in gossip. And my family, they broke their silence. Loretta called first. Her voice was trembling, stripped of the usual polish. "Do you realize what you've done? You've dragged our name through the mud. You've destroyed us." I let her finish, then answered flatly, "You destroyed yourselves the day you chose lies over loyalty." She hung up. Hours later, Tasha appeared at the gate again, makeup smeared this time, her bravado gone. She begged, almost whispering through clenched teeth. "Take it down, Kemi, please. They'll come after all of us. You don't know what these men are capable of." I stared at her through the iron bars. "You should have thought about that before you laughed at me, before you called me less. Now you'll watch me become more than any of you could stand." Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She just turned and walked away, shoulders bowed under the weight of a truth she'd helped bury. That night, my lawyer came with updates. The exposure had triggered government inquiries, land audits, and a cascade of frozen assets. The men behind Mr. Hart would not be able to hide in shadows anymore. They would have to step into the light, and that terrified them more than me. But Malik, he wasn't finished. Just past midnight, a message slipped onto my phone. No caller ID, just text. "If you think you've won, remember, the tree with the sweetest fruit is always the first to be cut down." My chest tightened, but only for a moment. I walked to the window, stared at the mango tree swaying in the night air, its branches stretching stubbornly against the dark. If you're still listening, take this truth with you. When they can't break your spirit, they'll threaten your roots. But roots don't scare easily. Roots dig deeper when the storm comes. The next morning, I prepared my final move. I arranged a press conference at the courthouse, public, undeniable, impossible to silence. Cameras lined the steps, reporters shouting questions before I even spoke. I lifted the tin box high, the documents inside rattling like chains finally broken. My voice carried across the crowd. For years, they called me poor. They tried to erase me. They mocked me in front of their feasts and whispered against me in their meetings. But today, I stand not as their victim, but as the rightful heir to truth, and I will not be silent. The crowd erupted, microphones pushed closer, shutters clicked in rapid fire. And in that roar, I felt it, the shift. The inheritance wasn't just land or wealth. It was the power of owning my story. Somewhere in the crowd, I saw Malik's face, pale, hollow, watching as the stage he'd tried to own crumbled beneath his feet. And for the first time, he was silent. But I knew silence wasn't the end. Silence was the pause before the next storm. And I was ready for it. That night, after the cameras dimmed and the courthouse emptied, the storm Malik had promised finally broke. A rock shattered the front window of Grandma's house, scattering glass across the living room floor. Spray-painted words glared from the porch. "Traitor!" I stood in the doorway, the word burning against the wood like a scar. This wasn't family anymore. This was war. I called the police, filed the report, but I knew better than to expect protection. Men like Hart didn't leave fingerprints, and family like mine knew how to vanish into the shadows. The law would watch, but it wouldn't shield me. The next morning, however, fate delivered something I hadn't expected. A package, plain brown, no return address, left at the gate. I brought it inside cautiously, peeled the tape, and found a stack of documents older than anything in Grandma's tin. These weren't land deeds. They were letters, correspondence between my grandfather and government officials, proof that much of the land had been granted to him legally, protected under agreements none of Hart's men could override. And at the bottom of the stack, one final letter addressed simply to my blood. "They will come for you when you know too much. They will call you poor, weak, undeserving. But remember, the land remembers. The tree remembers. And when you stand rooted, you will outlast them all." I held the letter to my chest, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Grandpa's words were more than comfort, they were strategy. This wasn't just inheritance. This was legacy, designed to outlive betrayal. But Malik wasn't done. That evening, I received another message. This time, a video. Loretta, sitting in a chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Malik's voice behind the camera, cold and sharp. "Stop your little crusade, Kemi. Take the settlement. Walk away. Or the next video won't be so polite." My hands shook, but my voice didn't when I whispered to myself, "You made your choice, Malik. Now I'll make mine." The following day, I returned to the courthouse steps, the new documents clutched in my hands. The crowd was even larger this time, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. My voice cut through the chaos. My family tried to bury the truth. Outsiders tried to buy my silence. But today I bring proof that the land was never theirs to sell. It belongs to my bloodline, and I will defend it, not with violence, but with truth. Because when lies fall, truth remains. The roar of the crowd rose, a wall of sound that even Malik, watching from the fringes, could not silence. He disappeared before the cameras turned to him. That night, as I sat beneath the mango tree, its roots steady beneath my feet, I realized the war wasn't over. It might never be, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is whether you break, or whether, like the tree, you remain. If you've stayed with me this far, let this be your lesson. Never let anyone tell you you're poor when your roots are rich. Never let anyone shrink you when your legacy is vast. And when they laugh, when they mock, when they try to bury you, remember, the tree that grows in silence will one day bear fruit loud enough for the world to taste. So subscribe now, because the next story I share will show you exactly what happens when the betrayed become untouchable.